Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Montclair, I'm pleased to welcome you to our virtual forum for the Board of Education candidates. My name is Katie Toledano, and I am representing the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase the understanding of major public policy.
Frozen.
I can't hear.
Katie's been cut off.
Oh, okay.
We have a lot of people joining, so perhaps we should wait a minute or so.
Okay, let's just wait a minute. I'm going to text her and ask if she can dial in again.
Donna, I'm here. I don't know what happened, but I'm back.
Okay, Katie, how about if you start again? Sorry, we've had a technical difficulty with maybe with everyone joining.
No problem. I'll start again now.
Take a breath and people still joining.
Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Montclair, I'm pleased to welcome you to our virtual forum for the Board of Education candidates. My name is Katie Toledano, and I'm representing the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Empowering voters, defending democracy is our message. Elections and voting are core concerns for the League. We are committed to providing fact-based information about issues and positions candidates take on those issues to help voters make their own decisions and participate in our electoral process. We envision a democracy where everyone has the right, the knowledge, the confidence, and the opportunity to participate. The League of Women Voters never supports or opposes candidates for office or political parties. Any use of the League name or footage from this debate in campaign materials, literature, or advertising of any kind, including the internet, cable, or television, has not been authorized by the League of Women Voters. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator, Marlene Sincaglia, a trained moderator and member of the League of Berkeley Heights, New Providence, and Sons. She will introduce the candidates and outline the format for this evening. In addition, I would like to introduce our timekeeper, Michelle Bobrow of the League of South Orange Maplewood. Both participants were selected in part because they are not voting members in this area.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everybody. Good evening. There are 9 candidates running for 2 open seats on the Montclair Public School Board of Education. Tonight's program is going to be in 3 parts. The first part are opening statements. I will introduce the candidate. The candidate will then have 2 minutes in which they will tell you a little bit about themselves and why they should be elected. The second part of the program are the questions and answers. Questions were submitted by you audience members and the public. And the candidates will have 1 minute to answer. Not all candidates will be answering each of the questions, but I made sure that each candidate has the same number of questions to be answered as everybody else, and that each candidate is going to be answering first, minus the opening and closing, as the other candidates in the group. Questions were screened mainly to avoid redundancy. The third part of the program are the closing statements. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to do a closing statement. And so Without further ado, we are going to begin. The opening statements are 2 minutes in length. You may notice that there is a box that says timekeeper. The timekeeper will let the candidate know when they have 30 seconds left in their response. After those 30 seconds are done, the candidates and myself will see a red stop sign. The candidate may complete their thought before actually stopping, but they will be prevented from going on and on and on. As I said, we have 9 candidates, and we want to make sure that we get through all the wonderful questions that were prepared for this evening. So our first candidate that we'll hear from is Ms. Yvonne Bouknight. Two minutes, opening
You're on
statement.
mute. You're on mute.
Good evening, Montclair. I am Yvonne Bouknight, an independent candidate for the Montclair Board of Education. I want to utilize my gifts, experiences, and talents to serve the Montclair school and community with understanding and purpose. My position of transparency, equity, and diversity, coupled with my effectiveness as a retired educator of 39 years, has given me the confidence and drive to serve. My experiences are intersectional, which gives me a unique viewpoint. I've taught in grades K through 8, served adult learners as an adjunct professor, mentored and trained in-service and pre-service teachers on the best practices of literacy and technology integration. I've co-chaired school review when budget cuts threatened to hire part-time nurses here in the Montclair Public Schools. I've served on the superintendent search committee as a parent volunteer. I've advocated for women, children, and youth in the community and around the world. My work with children from several zip codes such as East Orange, Elizabeth, Irvington, Plainfield, and Glen Ridge have been many. I conclude that there is one common thread among them. They all have dreams and needs. They all want to experience success, and they do not want to disappoint their parents. Montclair Public Schools help to educate my children pre-K through 12. One daughter is a system analyst and the other a director of admissions at a college in Boston. They were nurtured by excellent educators along with community partners like Rites of Passage, Junior NAACP, Sister to Sister, Girl Scouts, SNAPA, and Imani. They participated in sports, taking honors, high honors, and AP courses. 18 years later, I can say without a doubt, it took a village to get them career ready. That is my why now drive for serving the Montclair school and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Melanie Deysher.
Hi, I'm Melanie Deysher. I'm an occupational therapist and mom of 3 boys in the Montclair Public Schools in grades 12, 9, and 7. I'm passionate about literacy. It's the cornerstone of academic achievement and a kid feeling good about themselves. It's also an equity issue, and it's a chance for us to help close the opportunity gap. I'm here today because of a journey that started in trying to help my son. He went from being a joyful kid who loved school to a child I actually had to carry into the building because he couldn't read and he felt so badly about himself. It was a struggle with the school system to get him evaluated and get him the services he needed. While he did eventually get help, he missed out on a huge window of neurodevelopmental opportunity in learning to read. Reading struggles are a huge driver of the opportunity gap. It is a gen ed and a special ed problem. It's not just about fixing things for my kids, it's about fixing the system to work for all kids. Literacy needs to lead the way if pathways to academic success are truly open to all. So I started attending and speaking at Board of Ed meetings. I partnered with the NAACP. I'm on their education committee and dyslexia task force. I worked with the Civil Rights Commission and CPAC, and I have been having regular meetings with district administration. about this issue. Montclair now has a universal screener to identify children that are at risk for reading struggles. We are catching them before they fail. I'm proud of this accomplishment, but there is much more work to be done. I'd like a seat at the table to ensure progress continues on this and many other issues. I am pleased the Montclair community gets to vote on who is representing them on the Board of Ed. This vote was made possible by the efforts of Vote Montclair, and I am grateful for their support. I am an independent thinker with no other agenda than to focus on what is best for the children in our district. I will work hard for the students and families and teachers of our district if I am elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mrs. Phaedra Dunn.
Good evening, Phaedra Dunn, most recently a licensed clinical social worker and former educator. I've had the wonderful opportunity to serve students in K through 12 as a school social worker, a child study team member, character education teacher, dean, and administrator. I was thrust into the field of social work and sent to represent students in court and schools before I even understood the full scope of what I was doing in the educational setting. It was there that I eventually began to understand the importance of education and students and equity for students. After that job, I continued working and advocating for students and thrust myself into the world of education by working in schools. And so moving forward, I was determined as many years later, I was determined as a mom to move to the town of Montclair because I heard about these wonderful magnet schools. I am a graduate of a magnet high school. And so I thought, what a wonderful opportunity for my child. While being in Montclair, I've had the opportunity to become engaged in a number of organizations. The NAACP, SATP co-chair at my son's middle school, a member of the PTA at my son's elementary and middle school, PTAC DEI co-chair, sister to sister, and co-founder of Montclair Moms of Color. My expertise lies in that I am a community member who's committed to equity and eradicating the achievement gap. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Jerold Freier.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jerold Freier, and when you're looking on your ballot, look on the far right-hand side for my name. There are three areas in which I believe that I can add value to the Montclair School Board. They are public service, my role as an educator and teacher, and finally, my work in finance. In public service, I have 14 years experience in public service in Montclair. I served 2 terms on the school board. I was elected to the town council, and I also was on the town planning board. In education and teaching, I'm getting my doctorate in education from Caldwell University. I'm almost finished. And I have a master's degree in education from Harvard University. I created and taught over 500 seminars and workshops. And for 18 years, I was a course developer and lead instructor for the Federal Reserve System. Since retiring, I've been teaching college and graduate courses in communication, management, and finance at Rutgers, at Montclair State, and at Caldwell University. The two primary, as you may recall, my third area of expertise is finance. I have over 45 years experience arranging all types of financing, analyzing all types of financing arrangements, including union contracts. I understand how we can improve the MEA contract and in order to benefit both the employees and also to benefit the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Noah Gale.
Hi, my name is Noah Gale. What would it feel like if the Board of Education had less fighting? What if we spread a culture of civility at our meetings? Hi, my name is Gale. I promise to bring people together for the betterment of the school community. I am a graduate of the Montclair Public School System, and I am a third-year undergraduate student at Montclair State University studying early childhood education. I made Dean's List every semester for the past 2 years. My goal is to become a kindergarten teacher. As a younger person, I may have less experience professionally, but I have been very active in the community and our school system. I took a gap year after graduating from Montclair High School in 2018 and volunteered as a student teacher at Edgemont Montessori Elementary School. I have a history of committed service in our district. I have attended almost every Board of Education meeting for the last 8 years since September 15th, 2014, which was a Monday. I remember the dates. That's right. School has not always been easy for me as I am a special needs student. But with the help of talented teachers and paraprofessionals, I was able to succeed in the Montclair School District. One of the things I would fight for on the board is to better serve special education students by employing more paraprofessionals and adding more inclusion classes. My main goal is to adopt policies that promote educational excellence and equity, including teachers earning fair pay and getting the supports that they need. I genuinely care about this community and the future legacy of the school system, its students, and its staff. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Lauren Griffin.
My name is Lauren Quinn Griffin. I've been a resident of Montclair for 6 years, and I've been a Montclair public school parent for the same amount of time. We have 2 children in elementary school and 1 at Buzz Aldrin. For the past 100 days, I've been a long-term sub at Northeast teaching 1st grade. I've been teaching for about 20 years. I've been a special educator and have taught in both public and private schools in New York City and in Oakland, California. During the pandemic, I taught kindergarten every day from my basement, from this desk, on Zoom every day. I'm running because I've now looked at Montclair public education as a parent and as a professional, a parent who has no intentions of leaving the district, and as a professional who has seen how it's done in other places. When our own kindergartner couldn't be an in-person learner last year, I developed an outdoor curriculum. I pulled into people's driveway to bring what kindergartners weren't able to get over Zoom. I looked at what was missing and got creative with filling in the gaps. It was a simple pivot that had a huge impact. What we need as parents and as educators is support from the community, support from a school board that can hustle to fill in the gaps that have grown over the years. We need a voice in the decision-making process to ensure that all of our children are subject to an equitable and fair education that demonstrates the best practices available. Montclair's curriculum is tired. We need to bring professional development opportunities back to our faculty and get them excited about teaching in a way that doesn't require worksheets and worry to meet every child's needs. During my years in New York, I was part of a citywide planning team who met to reshape the social studies curriculum of our district. We collaborated, questioned, and eventually changed the curriculum to be rigorous and thought-provoking. I also spent a considerable amount of time working with coaches from Teachers College to hone the way we taught our students to read and write. Montclair's curriculum can be as vibrant, as engaging as Montclair itself is, but it needs the support of people who want to put in the time to make the changes. I'm running for this board position because I am one of those people.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mrs. Holly Shaw.
Hi there. My name is Holly Shaw. I've been a resident of Montclair for 8 years, and I have 3 children who currently attend Montclair Public Schools at Watchung, Buzz Aldrin, and my daughter at the high school attended Glenfield. I'm running for the BOE because I've seen firsthand the issues impacting our district, and I want to be part of the solution. I believe it's important to have parents with children in the school represented on the board, and I'm not funded by or supported by any organization or group. I was raised by a single mother, and I grew up living below the poverty level. I graduated from a large public school in California, which is very similar to Montclair in terms of diversity and economics. This has given me a personal perspective on the issues we face here in Montclair, such as opportunity gaps and equity. I'm now raising my children with more opportunities than I had as a child, but I'm still extremely aware of the opportunity gap in our district. At this moment, I think there are two main priorities that we have. First, repairing our school buildings and addressing the HVAC system. And this begins with getting the bond referendum on the ballot in November in order to get the funding our district needs. And second, dealing with the mental health and learning loss of students during COVID. We need to address the achievement gap in the district. And as a board member, my priority would be to address the mental health fallout from COVID learning. We cannot address equity gaps without giving kids mental soundness for learning. We have to make this a priority. We only delegated $45,000 for more than $5 million in ESSER funds towards the mental health for students and teachers. We spent 3 times that amount on desk shields. We need to do better. What drew my family to Montclair was the strong magnet system and the innovation in education and the quality of the teaching staff. While I support the magnet system, I believe that right now the diversity we strived for is falling short. We need to reassess how we are placing children in elementary schools. I've spent the last months talking to parents and teachers, and what I'm hearing is that we have a lack of transparency. I'm a problem solver and a creative thinker. I'm somebody who gets things done. My volunteer work and past career in finance has prepared me with the skills that will work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next, Mr. George Simpson.
Hi, everyone. I'm George Simpson. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to introduce all of us to you. Like many of you, 11 years ago, we moved here for the schools. Yes, from Brooklyn. Sorry about that. A college friend of mine once remarked, an interesting remark. He said, you don't really live in a town until your kids start going to school there. And I found out how true that was the moment my boys started going to Bradford. You see, our schools here in town are the glue that really holds the town together. Our days revolve around the school day. The parents of our children's friends become our friends. And in my case, that also includes the mighty Pac-12 Cub Scout troop, where I volunteer as an assistant den leader. But when I initially toured the grade schools 6 years ago, I actually fell in love with each school in turn, one after the other. I recall a math teacher, I believe it was at Bradford, who explained how she used the college basketball brackets to explain fractions. And right then and there, I knew that kind of creativity was the kind of town for me and us. So when I heard about collapsing staircases and infrastructure that was falling apart, and I saw an opaque board that didn't communicate and pointed fingers, I really wanted to do something, but there was nothing I could do. But this election has fortunately given me that opportunity. I've spent my career in advertising as a creative director. I was tasked with solving intractable client problems and coming up with creative solutions to fix them. You know, I think Montclair schools could really use a healthy dose of creative problem solving. Because think about it, if we keep having the same old problems year after year, then the same old solutions are the problem. We need to think out away from what we usually do and think of a way to do things new. Like, let's be bold enough to ask, what if? Let's try new ideas. Let's be unafraid to discuss solutions together, to communicate, to try, to fail, and get up again and try again. This is how great things get done. And it's how I've approached every challenge throughout my career. And it's how I'll approach the challenges facing our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm asking each of you for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our last candidate, Ms. Jennette Williams.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending. I'm a career educator here in Montclair. Montclair is a wonderful community in which I thrived. Where else could a first year beginning teacher come in and have the opportunity to work with an individualized math program so that I had an opportunity to see what children grades K-5 were able to do. I worked with the best of the best teachers who gave me the skill set that I needed. Where else but in Montclair would you have what I have had the opportunity to work with Montessori teachers and learn how the Montessori teachers teach and thrive and get their children working? Where else would I have had the opportunity to work with a teacher in her special classroom, her special science classroom, a green lab, a greenhouse lab? Where else but here in Montclair? I am running for a seat on the Montclair Board of Education because I believe education is the heart of democracy. The creative energy of democracy has an opportunity to flourish when given a seat at the table. I will use my talents to welcome everyone in the community and remind them that diversity is the foundation of Montclair's strength. Together, we will envision and create a healthier learning environment that fosters involvement, inquisitiveness, exploration, and conversations. I have been very fortunate, as I said, to teach in this district where the teachers follow the tenets of education. They are valued, and children are motivated with challenging activities. I have not received any endorsements, and I have not received any donations from any groups. I too am an independent candidate.
Thank you. We now move to the second portion of the program. These are general questions. 3 candidates will be answering this question. They are Ms. Bouknight, Mr. Freier, and Mrs. Shaw. The questions reads, how do you see your role vis-a-vis the superintendent of schools? Do you consider your role to be supportive or directive, and explain? And Ms. Bouknight, you're going to go first. You have 1 minute to respond.
My role as a board member is to support the superintendent. He is the person who actually runs the district. My role as a board member would be to hear what the community is saying and how they are responding to what is happening in the district. The superintendent is the director of all areas of learning in the district. He is the one that drives, he is the driving force behind the various departments within this district. It is he that I look to and say, is this what is recommended for the children by the people who we are serving as board members? I am not in charge of the board. I am not in charge of the district. It is the job of the superintendent to see that things are done, and I am the ears and eyes of the district's community. Thank you.
Mr. Freier.
You can tell whether or not a community has a successful school board by whether or not it manages to have a permanent superintendent and never has any temporary superintendents, because a temporary superintendent means that most progress stops. Unfortunately, Montclair has had many dysfunctional school boards. Fortunately, now we have our first permanent superintendent in years. And as school board members, we need to help him and his team, or her team, if we had a woman, to be successful. That is the first and most important responsibility of the school board, is to hire the superintendent and to make sure that he or she is successful. Thank you.
This is a really great question, and I feel like there seems to be confusion sometimes on what the board's role is and what the board's role is in relationship to Dr. Pons. I really think that the board's role is to create an environment that fosters the best public school education, and we need to service the diverse needs of our community. And as a board member, we should foster communication and funding and leadership in the schools. And part of that is being supportive of Dr. Pons, but also holding him accountable. And that means that we need some sort of oversight in terms of making sure he's communicating, which is a word that everybody keeps saying. and that he's meeting with unions. He's not canceling meetings. He's showing up to important meetings and doing his job and meeting his benchmarks. And I think that's a very important role of the board, is to, have a great working relationship with him, but also not be afraid to challenge any decisions or communication issues.
Thank you. Okay, question number 2 will be directed to Ms. Deysher, Mr. Gale, and Mr. Simpson. And the question reads, what would you say has been Montclair School's best successes in the past several years? And Ms. Deysher, you go first.
I believe that with Dr. Pons as our leader, we have undertaken some challenges that have previously gone unmet. A special ed audit that was recommended for probably about 10 years ago was finally undertaken this past spring and can now serve as a roadmap for us to move forward. The district successfully negotiated a grant to train teachers out at Fairleigh Dickinson University and Orton Gillingham instruction. So now we have a cohort of teachers graduating. It's either 10 or 12, and a new cohort that's halfway there. It's an expense-free program that now we can have reading specialists spread around the district. We have a assistant superintendent of equity and curriculum, and that's a big win for the district as far as ensuring that we start taking steps to improve the opportunity gap. I just feel like we are on the road. Oh, and my personal favorite, the universal screener. Thank you.
Some of my priorities for the Board of Ed budget are improving the HVAC systems and repairs in the school buildings, more inclusion classes. When I was in kindergarten many years ago, many moons ago, in the year from September 7th, 2005 to June 22nd, 2006 school year. Yep, that's right. Anyway, I was in an inclusion class where there was one regular education teacher and one special education teacher to help students. And my two best friends are still from kindergarten, in fact. But anyway, I really think that inclusion classes would work for special education students, as well as smaller class size. Instead of 25 students, there should be 9 students in the classroom, and more paraprofessionals for special education students. I had an aide, a paraprofessional, all the way from preschool through high school, and that really helped me, because if it wasn't for all my paraprofessionals one-on-one, I would not have been able to graduate from the school system and go to college.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Simpson.
Hi. I think that most of the successes that we've had in the school have not come from the top, they've come from the bottom, meaning the average voter, parents, and the teachers themselves. I think one of the great successes has been the absolute unfailing dedication of the teachers during the last 2 years in holding their classes together. I watched my children, learning remotely how much they really wanted to be back in the class, but the teachers did an absolutely heroic job, and we really need to support them. The other great success, I think, in this town in the last few years was defeating the charter schools. The attempt by outside influences to try to come in here and create a charter school and use up public tax dollars was just an abomination. And I think the fact that we pushed back hard on that was a great success for the town overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Question number 3 will be Mrs. Dunn, Ms. Griffin, and Ms. Williams. And the question is, how will you seek to get a broader involvement from the community beyond parents and caregivers? And Mrs. Dunn, you get to answer first.
I would seek to get a broader environment from the community beyond parents through helping people understand that everyone is a stakeholder. I can hear feedback, I'm sorry. Helping us better understand that there are stakeholders. There are, especially at a time like this, there are people who are taxpayers who don't have children in the district, or they may have graduated, but what's happening currently will impact them. They are a stakeholder in that. And so I think we can do that through having community forums, engaging those around us and letting them know that the education of our children is not just for the parents, but it's for all. It benefits our community as a whole. So I think through community forums, having coffees, being open to meeting and talking with people and addressing their concerns, especially at a time like this. Thank you. Thank you.
I think that the best way to get the community involved outside of parents is to create more service opportunities for our school. I think that using our magnet themes as springboards to create service opportunities for our school to be present in different areas of the community will keep our schools and our faculty and our administrators on the lips of people who don't even have children in the school. People will feel more invested in our education and in the tax dollars that we spend if they see the efforts of our children giving back to the community on a regular basis, not in isolated one-off fundraisers.
Ms. Williams.
Yes, I think that one of the ways that we can have more community relationships would be with having more conversations. I think it's imperative that we build partnerships with others in the community. Perhaps they can help with the students. And when I say help with the students, help with the funding that we may need for certain programs, allow students to have the opportunities to be mentored, to have hands-on activities with the corporate sectors of our population, as well as any of the other businesses that are in our district. Again, conversations are important. I think it's imperative that we go into the schools as board members. We go into the schools, we go out to the realtors, we go out to everybody who is a stakeholder here in our community.
Thank you. Our next series of questions are based on budgeting. Question number 4, we have Mr. Freier, Ms. Bouknight, and Mrs. Shaw will be answering the following question. How should the Board of Education balance the need to provide a quality education with the need to manage the local taxpayer burden? Mr. Freier, you go first.
Thank you. We need to stretch the tax dollars. And the way we stretch the tax dollars is by partnerships. The most expensive way to deliver any service is by using school employees. The best way to deliver any service is with school employees. But what we need to do is to look for partnerships. The partnership may be, for example, with Montclair Kimberly. If we were to run a joint summer school, instead of each running our own summer school, we could save money. So it's looking to stretch the dollars, and for teachers, it's looking to give them more benefits that they don't have to pay taxes on. This is another way in which we can give them remuneration, but at the same time, not use as much of the tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Bouknight.
A way forward in looking at this budget and utilizing services within close range to our district. For instance, partnerships with the local university. They have an art gallery there. They have the whole STEM program, teacher programs. There are departments there, the social justice department. Just partnering with Montclair State University, as well as local businesses in our district that could perhaps lend a hand and relieve some of the burdens that that exist in the budgeting. 95% of our budget is coming from our tax dollars. And therefore, it's essential that we take a look and see how we can redistribute some of those things to alleviate the pressures of the budget that exist here in this district.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Shaw.
Hi. I think, this is a great question right now as we move to a type 2 district. And, we really, I know every time the budget comes up, we obviously feel the tax burden here as Montclair residents. And, every time somebody speaks about the budget, we always talk about the 2% cap on the revenue portion of our budget. And how do you, when you have fixed costs, how do you give better services every year when you can't, when your money is going down? So there's so many solutions in terms of looking for grants and funding. We missed an opportunity to get funding for testing, and there's never sort of been an answer on why we missed the boat on that. But that's not servicing our community well when we're have an opportunity to get a grant or fund and we don't take it, or we don't apply for it, or we don't follow up with it. So I think being responsible with our money and what we are doing for our town.
Thank you. Question number 5 will be Mr. Simpson, Ms. Deysher, and Mr. Gale. The question is, if elected, what would you prioritize in terms of budget expenses, and what specific areas would you cut?
Well, before we cut anything, I think we'd need to, look at all of our revenue here in the town. I think we have plenty of revenue, and I know that the budgets are separate, they're chopped up, but I think we need to look at, maybe being a little bit more flexible. I wouldn't look at cuts immediately. I think the priorities need to be, looking at the infrastructure of the school, making sure the schools are safe, hiring engineers to get out there and make sure that, no more stairwells collapse, but also to talk to the teachers about the priorities. What do they need? And see if we can fund those a little bit better. See if we can find more creative and innovative ways to get teachers what they need without having to further burden the taxpayers in Montclair.
Thank you. Ms. Deysher.
I think infrastructure certainly needs to be the priority this year, and that can be tackled in the bond referendum. And the bond referendum, that debt is not subject to the 2% cap. So it doesn't require us to make budget choices like we have to cut teachers if we're going to go for the bond referendum. And I also like to agree with what Mr. Simpson said about we can look at, like, instead of the municipality and the school as 2 separate budgets, like maybe the town needs to start prioritizing what funding the school. Other school districts near us, Montclair spends 56% on its school, and over in Glenridge, they spend 60% of their tax levy. Ridgewood spends 66%. So as a town, being creative and thinking about, do we want to, as a community, prioritize the school in our budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gale.
For infrastructure, we need to spend we need to spend money on improving the HVAC systems in the school buildings. Some of these school buildings are over 100 years old, over a century, and repairs have not kept up. We need to spend money on making sure that the buildings are inspected and are safe for our students. We can't afford to have another stairwell collapse as it happened in the high school pre-COVID.
Thank you. Our next question is Ms. Williams, Mrs. Dunn, Ms. Griffin. The question reads, we know that there will be a bond referendum later this year to start the process of bringing our school infrastructure up to date. What will you do to ensure that the bond referendum passes? Ms. Williams.
In order to make sure that the bond, okay, thank you. In order to make sure, okay, I'm muted. I am muted.
No, now you are. Wait, so unmute yourself.
Was muted, it said muted. Okay, so now I can speak. Okay. The best way that this can happen is, again, to have conversations with the community, to go out to the stakeholders and have those conversations. I would like to see a way of perhaps getting more funding. Again, writing some grants, finding the corporate population that might be able to help us, reaching out to the realtors. They are the ones who know the builders and so forth, who are able to take care of the homes in the area and so forth. So I think they may have a connection to help us out. I think that we need to, again, have those conversations, go into the community, go into the houses of worship, go into the programs that are set up and provide services for our community, and ask and see what we can gather, and also see if there are federal fundings that would be available to us.
Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. I would say that the bond referendum in itself is like a candidate, right? We do need to get out in the community and help everyone understand the importance of the bond referendum and how it impacts our community as a whole. We need to sit down with stakeholders, taxpayers, parents, educators, everyone, and explain, why it's important and ways we can go about lessening the impact. Because as we know in Montclair, there are people who, an increase may or may not be an issue for them, but we know our elders and a number of other people in the community, an increase could really make the difference for them being able to live in the community. We need to sit down and explain to people that there's the ability to get a 40% state aid up front, which is a cash grant. We can explain to people how we can get the energy savings improvement program, which reduces some of the debt and can reduce the impact on our taxpayers. So I think it's important for us to get out and talk about the bond referendum and explain to people how it can lessen the impact on the taxpayers.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
My fellow candidates and I are pretty well aligned on this in thinking that we need to really show up, and board members need to show up and talk about the bond referendum. I have relationships with administrators and teachers and families in town, and most of us have sat on some side of a PTA meeting or a PTAC meeting or any kind of a meeting, and we all know the benefit of having someone come in to talk. Hearing what someone says in a message or an email is nothing, but having board members show up at these meetings and really engaging with the public and talking about the pros of the bond referendum, acknowledging the potential cons, but talking about the pros and focusing on the benefits that our schools will reap from the bond referendum will have a huge impact.
Thank you. The next question, everybody's going to have a chance to respond. 1 minute. The question states, how would you go about understanding and evaluating a very large and very complex school budget? And Mrs. Shaw, you're going to start us off.
Okay, well, I mean, I firstly, to understand a budget, I think PTAC did a great job actually in a YouTube video explaining how our budget process works. They were explaining the type 1, but I think firstly, it's very sort of easy. We're very fixed budget in terms of 90, the big pie of our budget goes to salaries and healthcare. So there's nuances within our budget But you have to look at, how are we doing well with our budget, with curriculum? Are there programs that we're spending money on that maybe aren't effective? Are there other programs that may be more effective? And when you look at a budget, right, you're not just looking at numbers, you're looking at the information behind the numbers. So, I was in finance, I read a lot of spreadsheets in my day. And I think there's information that always has to go behind numbers. And I think as a board member, it's important to understand and look at the numbers and understand what they mean.
Thank you. Ms. Bouknight.
I think it's very important when we talk about understanding something, we need to look at exactly what it is that we are funding. Is that thing that we're funding, is it necessary for whatever goal we're trying to meet? The goal is the ultimate idea behind the money. And if it's necessary and needed, then it's very important for it to be funded. You have to talk to those that are in positions to make that particular goal possible. You need to also then look back at the numbers, match it up with what the goal is, what we're trying to obtain, so that we are not cutting things that are really necessary in order to do whatever it is we're trying to make happen in this district.
Thank you. Mr. Freier.
Thank you. Well, the first thing to explain with the budget is that Montclair has one of the top school systems in the state. We rank in the top 100. I think our high school ranks around number 70. And so we are getting real value for that money. And we need to make sure that everyone is aware of it. We are getting excellent value for the money, and we're getting it because of the wonderful job that's being done by the teachers and the various special programs we have for special ed, and the programs we have for the magnet schools, the schools at the middle school, the programs at the middle school. The second thing is we need to explain that this is the number of students we have. This is the number of school teachers we need in order to teach them and have a normal class size. And that lets you know how much is left over. And then you realize that we're actually doing a very good job with the money, and we're getting very good value for it.
Thank you. And Ms. Griffith.
I think that we have to start by looking at the expenditures that keep coming up in bold. We look at what's been the biggest expenses as of late. Are they shields? Are they tents? Are they strange ventilation system? What keeps coming up? And are they still a value add? Do we still need to put that much money and that much funding into different areas of the budget? Can we get by with less? And what has taken priority, if anything? Where can we shuffle to be the top expenditure, the top category of expenses as it changes, as we move past a pandemic and into a normal year?
Thank you. Ms. Williams. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, now it's done. I was attempting to do that before, but for some reason it was being stalled. My concern is the fact that in order to spend money going forward, we need to look at where we've spent money in the past. Critically, analytically, look at how monies have been spent in the past. Are we still having the same problems from prior expenses? Are we having to address now problems that should have been addressed in the past and did not get the funding? With that kind of an evaluation, that scrutiny, we should be able to make positive decisions that will take us forward and not constantly having to go back and redo what should have been done initially. So looking at how monies have been spent in the past will help us move forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn.
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. How would you go about understanding and evaluating a very large and very complex school budget?
Well, one, in the time I've spent preparing for this and being honest, I've spent a lot of time on budget, right? So that's first and foremost, and making sure I understand that. And in my history as an educator, it is something that I've had to understand. But I think I would one of the first things I had to understand is how the state of New Jersey operates and how they decide how money is given to districts, so that it didn't look like in Montclair, we were just consistently doing the wrong thing. Understanding it sounds like we're spending a lot per student, but once you pay, salaries and healthcare and all of those things, what we're really left with. I think another thing that we need to do and understand is utilize federal grants and funding that are out there to help us better enable programs for the students and resources that we need. But yes, I have begun the work and continue to do the work around budgeting. But I do want us to understand there are grants and opportunities out there for us to help where we are not meeting the needs of the students.
Thank you. Mr. Gale.
Hi, I can get help understanding the budget, how the process works, and I can see, and I can put my priority, and I can help with the budget, my priorities. Thank you. Wait, I have more to say.
Okay.
For the, another thing I wanted to talk about, I'll get to this later when we're on the curriculum topic, but our curriculum related issue is that we should look into eliminating standardized testing. I think it is a waste of time. Teachers have to spend classroom time preparing the students for the test. The students get nervous about taking the test, and the teachers lose their teaching periods and the students lose their learning periods. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I think understanding, and again, like Ms. Dunn said herself, in preparing for this, I've spent a lot of time looking at a lot of numbers and a lot of spreadsheets. But in terms of how I would go about understanding a complex budget is no different than how I went about understanding my clients' problems throughout my career. As in advertising, you're dropped into, one day you're doing automotive, the next day you're doing beer or something like that, and they're completely different industries and they have completely different problems that you need to just dig in. The simple answer to the question is I ask questions, and I have my own way. That's my process. I ask and I ask and I ask until I dig down to bedrock and there's nothing left. So if I don't understand something, look, I don't know everything and I'm not ashamed to say it. So if I don't know something, I'm going to raise my hand and ask a question and keep asking until I get it. And it's as simple as that. Nothing, there's no detail too small when it comes to our schools. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Deysher.
Okay, 80% of our budget is dedicated to a big chunk of the pie is teacher salary and healthcare costs, and that's not going away. So in analyzing the rest of the pie, I feel like someone said, in God we trust, all others bring data. As a district, we need to be more data driven. And in a more timely fashion, we need quick, accurate data from the business office about, for example, what grants have we received? Can the buildings know about them so they spend that money effectively? Are the programs we're using in the classroom effective so we don't need to send kids out of district for dyslexia, for other special education issues? Are we achieving the best educational outcomes because we've used evidence-based practices? We need to use the data and we need to use it wisely in analyzing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we move to the next area, which is curriculum. And the next question will have Ms. Bouknight, Mrs. Shaw and Mr. Freier will be answering this question. Who should determine the content of curriculum? Parents, educators, Board of Ed, combination? What do you say? Sorry. Ms. Bouknight.
Okay. Yes, who should determine the curriculum? We have hired professional educators, the board office. We have a director of equity and achievement. We have a superintendent. We have a director of elementary education. And we have certified, very well versed teachers. They are the ones who decide the education and the curriculum here in this district. Our children, their needs, their wants, their gaps, that is what drives the curriculum. And it's very important that we kind of look and see what it is that the students need, line that up with what research-based practices are saying, and then develop a curriculum that speaks to the needs of the students that we are to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaw.
I think this is such a great question. And I feel like this is sort of an overreaching theme with sort of everything I'm saying tonight. But I do believe that communication and fostering a community that, that feels heard and is involved in educational processes is so important. And, for myself as a parent, like I have 3 kids at 3 different schools. And so I see different issues with curriculum or, I have 2 kids with 504s. And so, some do okay with the curriculum and some don't. And so I think getting parent feedback is so important, but also we have such amazing teachers in this district. They are so smart, they are so innovative, they are so creative. And getting their input to me is so important because they're on the front line. They're the ones teaching the curriculum. So they should have a stake in the curriculum and what we should be teaching, what's working, what's not working. And by not consulting them, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Thank you. Mr. Freier.
Yes, I think a lot of the curriculum comes to us from the state. In fact, most of it does. They tell us what needs to be covered in most courses. And then they test the students on that. Where we can have a difference is in the delivery. And let me give you an example. From my research, I know that if a student has a math class in the morning and a second math class in the afternoon, that we can close the math gap in a year or 2. A huge gap, but that will resolve it. So there are many opportunities in the delivery, in thinking a little bit outside the box to make it so that our curriculum works, because the curriculum that the students don't learn hasn't accomplished anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, Ms. Deysher, Mr. Simpson, and Mr. Gale. What policies would you advocate for, and how would you monitor to ensure that district curriculum is in compliance with the recent state laws and mandates, such as AAPI history and climate change education? Ms. Deysher.
I think that's a great question. And for a long time, I mean, we've already seen it in action in this district with the Amistad curriculum. It becomes, unfortunately, a box to check rather than a really vibrant, effective program. So I think, again, it all comes down to involving the teachers, training the teachers, and having them have a stake in it so they really own pieces of the curriculum and are inspired to deliver it to our kids in a way that brings it to life for our students. I think that's the key to all this. If the teachers are involved in the decisions, in bringing it to the classroom, they will do an awesome job at it, and it really becomes a program rather than a check mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. Again, I think this is another example of we shouldn't be pressing from the top down. We should be, things should be coming up from the bottom. And by that, I mean that, what Ms. Deysher said is absolutely correct. I think that we, need to involve the teachers and basically we delegate. I don't think the board should be creating policies or enforcing, minutia. I think we should set the pattern. We should set the policy, and we should say this is what needs to happen. But again, we do need to involve the teachers and give them an opportunity to make it their own. Because when you tell someone what they have to do, that they only go so far. They only do it. But if you make people part of the process and you allow them the freedom to do it the way they want, as long as they get to that end goal, is fine. We shouldn't be micromanaging or worrying about minutia. We should give teachers the freedom to do what they know how to do and let them do it, and not establishing harsh policies of any kind. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Gale.
Hey, everyone. So I think when it comes to the curriculum issue, I would follow up with the administrators about the curriculum, such as the assistant superintendent of equity and the director of elementary education. I would follow up with them about the curriculum as well. And another thing I want to talk about the curriculum is, which I mentioned before too, one curriculum related issue in our school system is that we should look into eliminating standardized testing. I think it is such a waste of time. Teachers have to spend classroom time preparing the students for the test, and the students get nervous about taking the test. Plus, I've often noticed this too, that they change the name of the test every few years. Prior to 2003, it was GEPA. From 2003 to 2015, it was known as NJS. From 2015 to 2018, it was PARC. And then from that point on, it's known as NJS LA. And this year they started a new one called Start Strong 2. There's too many standardized tests. The board has to get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our next question will be Ms. Griffin, Ms. Williams, and Mrs. Dunn. The question asks, how can the school board support the superintendent to ensure retention of staff and a supportive environment for new staff? Ms. Griffin.
Hi, as a new staff member this year, I'd like to answer this question with a lot of enthusiasm. Something that could be brought, there could be a better orientation period. There could be an orientation that not only teaches you how to check your email, but welcomes you to the district and gives you an overview of the curriculum that you'll be teaching. There could also be there could be professional development on the curriculum that's being used, because I hope that any curriculum that we're using didn't die the day that it was introduced. There have been innovations, there have been new twists to it, and we need to bring the new twist to the teachers so they can energize their own teaching and make the curriculum fresh for themselves and to meet the needs of their learners.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Yes, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. How can the school board support the superintendent to ensure retention of staff and a supportive environment for new staff?
One of the ways that the board can be supportive is to support teachers and support the initiatives that they have created. One of the initiatives that I co-wrote was to bring the open Reach Out to Schools competency program, the Stone Centers program, the Open Circle. That was an initiative that a co-worker and I wrote, and it provided professional development for the staff. Another initiative would be to use skills that the teachers already have. Let teachers teach teachers, show best practices, demonstrate those again as part of professional development. And again, have the superintendent be supportive of those efforts. Have a buddy system so that teachers can work with other teachers, observe one another, not evaluate, but observe one another and see what kinds of strategies they're using in the classroom that works to close the achievement gap or may not work to close the achievement gap.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn.
I think it's important that we first, as a community, as a people, look at teachers and understand that teachers are stakeholders in all of this. And I'm not saying we don't, but I think it's something that we need to state and first understand. Teachers are a stakeholder, just like parents, just like students, just like everyone else. So that's first and foremost. I think we have to I would support the superintendent in coming to the table more with teachers, engaging with them, hearing what their concerns are. I think implementing yearly surveys, assessments for teachers to say, here's what my needs are, here's what's going on in my school, in the district, in this classroom. I think we also have to make sure we are giving teachers choice in professional development. I think we have to better develop the entire district and in other areas. But if teachers had a say-so, a stake in their own professionalism and development, there would just be greater buy-in and we would have a lot less issues with teachers leaving the profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, dealing with special programs. The next question will be answered by Mr. Gale, Ms. Williams, Mr. Simpson. Regarding special education, do you feel that the Go Teach audit completed last year was an adequate and fair review? And what do you propose to make sure that we truly live up to our goals in the area of our educational program? And Mr. Gale.
We can better serve our special education students by employing more paraprofessionals, adding more inclusion classes, and having smaller classes overall. All of these improvements cost money, so we may not be able to do as much as we would like, but I think they are very important.
And Ms. Williams.
Yes, I think what Go Teach provided, the information they provided was very helpful for us. And I see that some suggestions were made that we need to initiate and really go very far into looking at the problems and what has been going on with special ed. One of the concerns I've always had with special ed programs that are written is the fact that it depends on the program. When you're doing your IEP, it depends on the program that you're using on your computer, what your district bought. Some are more detailed than others. So that is very critical to make sure that we're doing that. And again, having teachers work with a buddy system so that they are working as a pair or three, whatever, so that they are observing one another and seeing if they are able to meet the needs of those students, because we do have to tailor the education of all of our students based on their needs.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I'll say up front that I'm not familiar with the Go Teach audit. However, having said that, I will say also that my son, who's in Bradford, does have an IEP, and he's had one since kindergarten. From my personal experience, what I see is the special ed teachers are doing a phenomenal job. Obviously, they can always use more help because budgets are stretched. If we face challenges, I think the only way to find out what really needs to be done is to talk to the people on the ground who do it every day. I mean, outside audits are nice, analyses are nice, but what really happens is, let's talk to the teachers providing these services and find out what it is they really need. Sometimes we do our own audit in that way, and we find out that, maybe the professional audit that was done doesn't actually get to the problem. So we'll have to find out what the challenges are and address them one at a time with specific answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And, okay, next question will be Mrs. Dunn, Mrs. Shaw, and Ms. Bouknight. The question is, from some of your responses to the PTA questionnaire, it seems that we're not serving either our best and brightest or those with special needs to a standard that we would expect. Are these part of the same problem? And can we address both of these student groups at the same time? Mrs. Dunn.
Yes, we can address both of these student units at the same time. Equity. Equity is the framework and the answer here. For far too long, education has just relied on equality and offering one thing. And there's many students in a classroom. If we utilize an equity framework, we can better understand students as individuals and the individual needs of students. Students do not come to school all with one circumstance, one life, one understanding of the world. But if we use an equity-based approach, we can make sure that every student's needs are met and we can close the achievement gap and really do a greater job with special education. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaw.
I completely agree with Ms. Dunn. I thought the Go Teach audit was like a really great sounding board, but it really, really highlighted the fact that we're not equitable with our special education. We offer different services at different schools. We have different criteria for the same disability. That's not equitable. And so how do we move forward? So I think that because we have such a lack of consistent services, we really need to start by coming together and creating equitable services at all schools. Children shouldn't have to change schools, because they have a certain disability that is not serviced at their school. And I know this happens a lot, and it's really unfortunate. So how do we, we start? I think the Go Teach audit gave really good blueprints for moving forward with this. But right now, I agree. We need to create the equity across the services.
Thank you. Ms. Bouknight.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, okay. From some of your responses to the PTA questionnaire, it seems that we're not serving either our best and brightest or those with special needs to a standard that we would expect. Are these part of the same problem? And can we address both of these student groups at the same time?
I believe that we can serve both of those types of students at the same time. The Go Teach survey gave us one recommendation that will allow us to speak to all students, whether they're special needs, students that are high achievers, as well as children that are not meeting the grade level benchmarks. We need a systematic language arts curriculum. Research tells us that children learn to read grades K through 3, and they read to learn grades 4 and up. It's important that we have a systemic language arts curriculum that will reach across the district. We need consistency, we need equity, and we need a systematic way to meet the needs of the students here in Montclair.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
I think that I think we can meet the needs of both of these groups of learners.
Sorry, excuse me, sorry.
Oh,
We're moving on to the next question. That's why I have the paper in front of me. Okay. The next question, Mr. Freier, Ms. Deysher, and Ms. Griffin will answer this question. How will you address the growing needs of the English language learner population in the district? Mr. Freier?
Well, that's a good question. And as you know, we have a growing number of Hispanic students moving into the district. We have a change in the demographics. And one of the things we have to think about is what is the most efficient way to do this? Because if we spread them out among all the schools, we severely limit the amount of support that we can provide them. Yet at the same time, if we concentrate them all in the same school or two schools, then we have a problem with basically not having them integrated into the general community. So it is a problem. And I think that what we have to do, first of all, is to study what other communities have done that have had the same situation of the non-English speaking population suddenly starting to balloon, and how they have handled it and what has worked and what hasn't worked, so we can follow the best practices.
Okay. Ms. Deysher?
I agree. We need to look at what other communities are doing to follow what is best practice. Again, following the data. What are programs that work most effectively to address these learners? I think it's important to provide teachers. Teachers are really the solution for a lot of these problems, with the education, resources, and the time they need to, and mentorship programs, so they have support in teaching these kids. And I think it's really important that the district reaches out to these children's families with a variety of materials and a variety of ways of outreach, at different times of day, in different venues. And we just need to both look at the data and both be willing to think outside of the box to address the needs of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Griffin?
I think that we have to recognize that our English language learner children are not speaking just Spanish. We have a wide variety of languages. I have many languages in my classroom as it is. It's also come to my attention that not every school has an English as a second language teacher. I had a child moved from one elementary school to mine after the winter break because she didn't have an ESL teacher at her school. And she was moved to ours, where ours had actually just retired. So we moved a child from one school to another, and we didn't have someone in place to service her to meet her needs. Our literacy curriculum is also designed for these children to fail. There is no way that this literacy program will help them with any kind of language acquisition, and forget about any kind of reading comprehension. It's a very cut and dry fill in the blank literacy curriculum, and there's no way that can provide any framework for success in reading and reading comprehension for our students.
Thank you. Now we're moving to the topic of equity, diversity, and social justice. And Mrs. Shaw, Mrs. Dunn, and Mr. Gale will be answering this question. What are your specific ideas and plans for addressing the achievement gap?
Sorry, I'm muting myself. I think there was a great committee that spent time, released a report in 2015 and gave a great roadmap to addressing the opportunity gap. And I feel like that's a great framework to start from. But I do think we need to address the algorithm for school placement to equalize diversity across our elementary schools and then into our middle schools. We need greater accountability with the district on setting clear goals and how they want to close the achievement gap and keeping them accountable. We need to look at both reading programs, math and reading programs. Look at the curriculum or how they're working, because everybody, the mantra tonight is literacy is really the cornerstone of closing the equity gap. And we need to create more diversity in our AP and high honor classes and universal pre-K. There are grants and state fundings for universal pre-K.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. Let's first start with the achievement gap report that was done in 2015 and the wonderful group of stakeholders that came together that, that were interviewed and that were utilized in making sure that we completed an achievement gap report. First and foremost, we need a new one. That was 7 years ago. And so it was based on, a number of students, students that were in high school at that time who are no longer in high school. So one, we need a new one. But number two, that report had a number of wonderful recommendations on it. And when you look across the schools, a lot of those things haven't been followed or even considered. And so we need to spend some time with that report, looking at the report details what needs to happen on an elementary school level, what needs to happen on a middle school level, what needs to happen at the high school. There are a number of issues and concerns. And like Ms. Shaw said, there are issues in the high school where students are placed, percentages of Black and Brown students versus their white counterparts. And so we really need to sit with that again and utilize the recommendations as it's already been laid out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gale.
I support a student equity advocate and educational efforts targeted at students of color to try to close the achievement gap in our district. I also support more aggressive recruiting of teachers and administrators who are diverse.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Ms. Williams, Ms. Griffin, and Mr. Simpson. Question: what is your commitment to Montclair's magnet model, and are there any adjustments needed? Ms. Williams.
Okay, when we take a look at the magnet model, we need to tweak the things that we have. Partnering with community stakeholders, developing mentoring programs with technology, universities, bringing in students from the universities who are going to get their degrees and letting them help to tutor students as well. Affirm multiple learning experiences, open the doors again to the cultural centers. When we had the Lincoln Center Institute, I was able to get trained there, and those teaching artists came to the building, and the children were able to see what happens with the dancers, what happens with the performers who are the actors and so forth. And again, when you're tailoring your education to the children's needs, you're looking at all of those intelligences that they have.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
I think that the magnet model is a really great idea. I think it's underutilized. I think that it could be each school's magnet can be the lens through which everything else is taught. The global studies school, we can teach literacy through the lens of global studies. We know diverse books to read. Everything is diverse. Every subject matter throughout the day will be taught through the lens of global studies and a needs and wants based curriculum. And it would be the same for the STEM school. It would be the same for the university school. I do agree that bringing visits back in, bringing people back into the buildings really gives life to a curriculum. Seeing faces that have made their vocations in STEM or in Montessori or in performing arts really gives life to the curriculum, and having those spaces be regular visiting artists instead of a once in a while thing would really bring a lot of life to the curriculum.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. It was a long, long road getting to the magnet system. There have been numerous very interesting documentaries and reports on what it took to get to the magnet system. And I think for its time and the problem it solved, it was a true innovation. But does it need tweaking? Does it need updating? Do all the schools have the right focus? I mean, let me say first off that I'm I would not get rid of the magnet system at all. Obviously, it works, but should we tinker around the edges? Do all the schools have the right focus? These are things we should look at. But clearly the magnet system is working. But in the areas it's not working, we need to dial those solutions up and make sure that it works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next series of questions deals with communications. And okay, so Mr. Simpson, Mr. Gale, and Mrs. Shaw are going to answer this question. How would you manage divergent viewpoints when making complicated decisions as a member of the Board of Education? Mr. Simpson.
Well, I mean, you just touched on my entire 35-year career is dealing with divergent viewpoints. Coming up with creative solutions for clients' problems is always going to set off. If you've got 6 people in a room, you're going to end up with 12 opinions. It's simply a matter of discussing what it is people are trying to accomplish. I think the answer is not to try to get people to give you their solution, but to tell you what their concern is. And if you can find out what someone's concern is, you generally find out with a group of 5 or 6 people that they kind of are sort of leaning toward the same issue. So anytime you've got divergent viewpoints, what you almost always have is different ways to say the same thing. So if you can get down to the base core idea, the problem that people have, the particular thing they're trying to solve for, you can almost always find a solution that makes most people happy. And it's something I've done my entire career, and I'm very comfortable doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gale.
I think it is for better communication from the Board of Ed, I would suggest holding open house nights, meeting with parents on an individual basis, putting out a newsletter, and I think it is important that we have a forum and have people listen and everyone give the chance to talk, and give everyone the chance to talk and speak. However, it has to be civility.
Thank you. And Mrs. Shaw.
I think this is such a great question because we're obviously a town full of very passionate people and a lot of opinions. And I think, just in preparing for this, I've been talking to, different people and stakeholders, and everybody has an opinion, one way or the other, and sometimes they're opposing views. I think the biggest issue the board faces right now, and something that we need to focus on is making sure people feel heard. I feel like there's really just a thread of a lack of feeling heard and feeling like we have a stake in our education system. And I feel like once you sort of do that, you allow the community to be involved. So, we set clear goals. We talk to people, we communicate. Not everyone's going to be happy with the decision because there's always going to be people with different, opinions. But I think it's important to communicate why we made a decision and make sure people feel heard.
Thank you. The next question goes to Ms. Deysher, Ms. Williams, and Ms. Griffin. And the question reads, how will you work towards a collaborative relationship with the MEA?
Yeah. I believe the district has thus far in the past year made some progress with which what we all have seen can be a difficult relationship. And everyone's participating in the Rutgers Labor Management Program. And if I sat on the board, I'd like to continue to be part of that effort. I also think like a major problem is just that teachers need to feel heard. Teachers need a seat at the table. And when that happens, when they're viewed as collaborators and their voices heard in things like curriculum and things like, if they feel safe in going back to school, when their opinions are truly valued and that's shown in policy decisions that the board makes and therefore the district follows through on, then I feel like union relations improve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Williams.
Union relationships have always been wonderful. There are times that people will not agree on things, but the relationship has been wonderful because they're the stakeholders. The teachers deliver instruction to the students. The teachers are responsible for having a say in what happens with the education of the children in the district. They're the ones who tailor the recipe, tailor the attire, if you will, that the children need in order to have a fair, equitable education. And they should be in on the conversation. And as was mentioned, it sounds as if they have been working with management previously and having workshops so that they can come together with the board and with the superintendent. But it's something that has always worked, it's always been there.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
I think that what we've learned from the past almost 2 years is what everyone has touched on, that everyone needs to be heard. And I think that if there was a bigger voice than just calling it the MEA in the past couple of years, things might have gone differently. If teachers have been polled, or if in the future, if teachers are polled about their personal opinions about big decisions, things might look or go differently. Hopefully we won't have big issues, huge, like we had safety issues in the past, but going forward, maybe having more of an MEA rep at board meetings or for board decisions would be very helpful to create a sense of collaboration and really value the role of the teachers, because at the end, whatever the board decides or whatever decisions are made, the teachers are going to be the ones who are executing them.
Thank you. And our next question will be for Ms. Bouknight, Mr. Freier, and Mrs. Dunn. And the question reads, what did we learn from the experiences of last year about effective communication amongst all stakeholders? And how do you see this improving? Ms. Bouknight.
Well, effective communication is paramount because that's what builds the relationships. What I think has happened over the past 18 months of instruction, we've learned a lot. We've learned that we can do things that we thought we couldn't do. We can do them now in a better way. Communication is paramount. I think we have learned that when we listen to how people are feeling, then we can have a better outcome in all areas. Communication with teachers, communication with parents, communication with community stakeholders. It's important to let everyone who is part of this town know exactly what's going on, how we can work together to make things better, so that the idea that we are one, we are all special, and that all people are important is heard by all.
Thank you. Mr. Freier.
I think one of the problems that we have to face is that the age distribution of our teachers in Montclair is heavily weighted towards older teachers. And as a result, these men and women were quite justifiably scared. They were afraid, and I don't blame them. And it's made for a very difficult time because, of course, for the parents, their children couldn't go to school and they felt that they were being unfairly burdened. And yet the teachers in our town, I can understand their feelings. They saw friends and relatives dying. And there's a real carryover of that fear. I'd like to discuss one other thing, and that is that we over communicate. We send out so much communication that we get so many emails that because everyone wants to be told about everything, that then nobody can find anything and no one starts to open up their emails anymore. No one opens up their mail. And we have to narrow down and focus on what we send and who we send it to, or nobody's going to read it.
Mrs. Dunn.
It's a great question, especially as a therapist. I think first and foremost, effective communication starts with listening. I think we all just want to communicate and we don't want to listen. And so first and foremost, you can't listen to respond, you have to listen, and you have to listen to the concerns. I think also more importantly, there is a history of certain stakeholders in the town, or all stakeholders in the town, not feeling heard. And that is part of the problem. We have to give each other a chance and understand we're starting as a new group. We have to listen to one another. We also have to first recognize one another as a stakeholder and not viewing another stakeholder's piece of the pie being greater than theirs, but understanding we all share in the same pie with the same goal of wanting our students to do well and to just feel great about school. So again, let's start with effective communication and go from there. Listening, listening, listening.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to be now going to our final portion of the evening, closing statements. We did have a number of questions, but there seems to be no time to get those done. So closing statements are for 1.5 minutes each, and we're going in reverse alphabetical order. So Ms. Williams, you go first. Closing statement, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I envision our community not as me, my, and I, but we and why as part of a wheel. That wheel will build its momentum to move forward. That wheel holds the center of democracy. That wheel has spokes, which are the stakeholders, the diversity, the parents, the staff, the students, our infrastructure, the curriculum, communications, committees. All of that works to move us forward. My experiences as a career educator here in Montclair, as a trained SERI, structured literacy dyslexia specialist, as a trained Orton Gillingham dyslexia specialist, as a Wilson System Certificate 1 reading specialist, and my background in guidance counseling, early childhood, and moderating and bringing forums together that address issues such as cyberbullying, such as diversity, such as writing curriculum for the district, such as coordinating the teacher program with Montclair State, such as being a trainer for parents with mega skills and the primary unit parents, such as co-writing the teacher-parent handbook for different schools. My diversity is there. My support is there for our district with our wheel.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I'm running for one reason and one reason only, to represent the needs of parents, teachers, and the kids. And that's all gotten lost in the past decade or so. One of the ways I'll do that is by helping to create an accountable, accessible, and transparent board that doesn't just communicate with teachers and parents and voters who may not have kids, but engages all of us in a dialogue so that everybody can be heard. That keeps coming up, the idea that people aren't heard, and I think people should be heard. I think also together, using the creativity that I've spent my career honing, we can tackle those giant challenges that we have by saying, what if? What if we tried this? What if we looked at the problem a different way? So I think that openness will help us to get great things done together. And I think finally, we all have given ourselves a great opportunity here, and a unique one with an elected board by supporting what matters most in this town, our children. yours and mine. So I ask for your vote and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaw.
Firstly, just thank you so much, League of Women Voters, for holding this forum tonight. And to the other candidates, I've learned so much. You are all so brilliant, amazing, inspiring humans. And so thank you for being part of this process. And I'm learning so much from you. I hope I've given you some sort of insight into what I stand for. I think it's important to tackle major issues like facilities and learning loss. But I also believe we need to meet the basic needs of our kids, like safety around the schools, making sure our kids are fed. And my daughter would really like some TLC at the high school bathrooms, soap, locks on the doors. I think those are important issues as well. And I think it's important for the board to work at. But I'm asking you today to vote for me to represent all families who live in the town of Montclair, to represent children and teachers, and to represent the underserved. I will do so by being fair and compassionate, and most of all, by taking action. I've done my research and I'm ready to fight hard for this community that I love. While I think it's important to have someone on the board with experience in curriculum and budgets, I also think it's important to elect someone who will work with the community and tackle issues with efficiency. I am qualified and motivated to be that person. Whether you vote for me or not, please show up on March 8th and show your support for these wonderful candidates, and most importantly, for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin.
I'm an innovator, and I understand the challenges of being a mom, a resident, and a teacher in the Montclair school system. We need agility to be able to move quickly and pivot when we encounter the unknown. Last year, we were mired in arguments as a community about safety, about testing, and we watched other school districts innovate, and we saw schools across the country testing students, opening outdoor classrooms, and thinking big. We need to move our 20th century classrooms into the 21st century, and our aging infrastructure is holding us back and it's holding our kids back. If you elect me, I'll dedicate myself to fighting for families, and I'll bring more than 2 decades of experience with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gale.
Enthusiasm, devotion, initiative. These are the 3 words that capture my candidacy. As anyone who knows me can tell you, I love everything about the Montclair public school system and the Board of Education. I deeply care about the students, teachers, administrators, and staff. Last summer, I was even a volunteer intern for Dr. Pons. My top priorities for the board are the following: to ensure that students can continue in-person education during the pandemic, to support and advance the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to better serve special education students by employing more professionals and adding more inclusion classes, and to adopt policies that promote educational excellence and equity, including teachers earning fair pay and getting the supports they need. Don't you want someone on the Board of Ed who has taken the time to participate in almost every board meeting, listened intently, and participated in the issues? I think I would bring a unique perspective to the board. I am asking for you to please vote for me, Noah Gale, on March 8th. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening. Looking forward to serving on the Board of Ed if I get elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freier.
Thank you. I bring to the board, or would bring to the board, the experience of what works and what doesn't work, an experience of how to implement solutions to problems. I'm going to give you an example. The reason we have a math achievement gap in the elementary schools is because we had a problem with the teachers not knowing how to do arithmetic very well. Unfortunately, or fortunately, elementary schools attract teachers that don't like math. We solved the problem once before. We sent the teachers back to school and taught them arithmetic so that they could do long division and divide fractions. And for 5 or 6 years, we closed the achievement gap. Of course, that's lost, and then you have to repeat it constantly. That's just an example of the things that need to be done. One of our other problems is that our best, most experienced teachers who we need to have in the school all the time get 4 weeks vacation in addition to having off July and August. This is something to deal with the MBA. It's not that we want to penalize them. It's rather, these are the teachers who we need. We need to have them in the classes, not using substitutes. So these are just a few of the issues that I would bring to the fore if I'm elected to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. Social learning theory informs us that behavior is learned. I have observed this both as an educator and as a therapist. We have to be mindful that our children are watching and learning from what we do and what we do not do. We cannot continue to find the minimum or status quo acceptable. We have to hold ourselves and our community to higher standards and higher ideals. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deysher.
For the past any number of years, I feel as a district, we've been distracted by many challenges, such as charter schools, collapsing stairwells, the pandemic, and now, we still face the ongoing challenge of fixing our infrastructure issues. However, I feel like we are now at a point where we can put maybe some of these challenges behind us while we get back to the business of focusing on educational excellence. And I believe this is an opportunity for the community to come together and to stand shoulder to shoulder, parents with parents and teachers and administration, that we can all agree upon we want what's best for our children. And I believe that this starts with academic excellence in the elementary school, both in the ELA curriculum and in the math curriculum. So when we talk about the opportunity gap, for example, the AP classes at the high school, it doesn't start when I showed up in 8th grade and decide I want to take higher level math. It started in kindergarten or 1st grade when I walked in and felt successful as a student. When I walked in and said, I know how to learn, I can do this, and I want to come back here and keep showing up. We need to bring that level of excellence back for all our families. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank all my fellow candidates for all your insights tonight, and I want to thank the community for showing up tonight. I hope you all show up to vote, and I hope certainly you'll vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Bouknight.
Human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes when people in positions or of authority do things with rather than to or for. First, I want to thank the League of Women's Voters and their partnership with the NAACP for hosting this platform tonight. I want to thank my fellow candidates for their transparency tonight. You see, my desire for a seat at the table is not for personal gains. My hindsight and my insight gives me the foresight to see the future. I want to be a part of the assurance that all the children of Montclair are given equal access and equitable opportunities to be our leaders of tomorrow. I believe all children arrive at our school doors with dreams, drive, and ambition to feel special and to be successful. I will work to be a voice for policies and initiatives that spark career-ready individuals upon graduation. You see, I believe it takes a village from the top down to the bottom up to come together and meet to make a difference. Vote 2A on March 8th, for I'm ready to serve. Good night, Montclair.
Thank you. Katie.
Thank you to the moderator, timekeeper, and league volunteers this evening. Thank you to the candidates for their willingness to participate and to the NAACP for co-sponsoring this event. Thank you, of course, to the audience for attending and being active participants in the democratic process. Finally, a special thanks to our broadcasters, Channel 34 and Radio Free Montclair. You will be voting for 2 of these candidates for the Montclair Board of Education to reflect the district's transition from a Type 1 to a Type 2 elected school board. This special election for school board members will take place on Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. Polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. There is also an option to vote by mail-in ballot. These have already started to circulate, so please keep an eye on your mailbox and return ballots by March 1st. Please visit EssexBoardOfElections.com for further information. Tonight, you have heard from the candidates about their positions on issues which might affect the future of the children within our community. Make a wise decision and cast your vote. Don't forget to encourage others to vote as well. Thank you and good night.
Recording stopped.